File 10.
One by one he took out a succession of beautiful rifles, opening and shutting them with a snap and a clang, and then patting them as he put them back into the rack, as tenderly as a mother would fondle her children.
This is Bland's .577 Axite Express," said he. "I got that big fellow with it."
He glanced up at the white rhinoceros.
10 more yards, and he'd have added me to his collection. On that conical bullet his one chance hangs. 'Tis the weak one's advantage fair. Hope you know your Gordon, for he's the poet of the horse and the gun, and the man that handles both. Now here's a useful tool. .47, telescopic sight, double ejector, point blank up to 350. That's the rifle I used against the Peruvian slave drivers 3 years ago. I was the flail of the Lord up in those parts, I can tell you, though you won't find it in any blue book. There are times, young fellow, when every one of us must make a stand for human right and justice, or you'll never feel clean again. That's why I made a little war of my own. Declared it myself, waged it myself, ended it myself. Each of those nicks is for a slave murderer. A good row of them, what? That big one is for Pedro Lopez, the king of them all, that I killed in a backwater of the Portomayo River. Now here's something that would do for you."
He took out a beautiful brown and silver rifle.
"Well rubbered at the stock, sharply sighted, 5 cartridges to the clip. You can trust your life to that."
He handed it to me, and closed the door of his oak cabinet.
"Oh, by the way,"
he continued, coming back to his chair,
"what do you know of this Professor Challenger?"
"I never saw him till today."
"Well, neither did I. It's funny we should both sail under sealed orders from a man we don't know. He seemed an uppish old bird. His brothers of science don't seem too fond of him either. How came you to take an interest in the affair?"
I told him shortly my experiences of the morning, and he listened intently. Then he drew out a map of South America and laid it on the table.
"I believe every single word he said to you was the truth," said he earnestly. "And, mind you, I have something to go on when I speak like that. South America is a place I love, and I think if you take it right through from Darien to Fuego, it's the grandest, richest, most wonderful bit of earth upon this planet. People don't know it yet, and don't realize what it may become. I've been up and down it from end to end, had 2 dry seasons in those very parts, as I told you when I spoke of the war I made on the slave dealers. Well, when I was up there, I heard some yarns of the same kind. Traditions of Indians and the like, but with something behind them, no doubt. The more you knew of that country, young fellow, the more you would understand that anything was possible. Anything. There are just some narrow water lanes along which folk travel, and outside that it's all darkness. Now, down here in the Mato Grosso," he swept his cigar over a part of the map, "or up in this corner where 3 countries meet, nothing would surprise me. As that chap said tonight, there are 50,000 miles of waterway running through a forest that's very near the size of Europe. You and I could be as far away from each other as Scotland is from Constantinople, and yet each of us be in the same great Brazilian forest. Man has just made a track here and a scrape there in the maze. Why, the river rises and falls the best part of 40 feet, and half the country is a morass you can't pass over. Why shouldn't something new and wonderful be in such a country, eh? And why shouldn't we be the men to find it out? Besides," he added, his queer, gaunt face shining with delight, "there's a sporting risk in every mile of it. I'm like an old golf ball. I've had all the white paint knocked off me long ago. Life can whack me about now, and it can't leave a mark. But a sporting risk, young fellow, that's the salt of existence, and it's worth living again. We're all getting a deal too soft and dull and comfy. Give me the great wastelands and the wide spaces, with a gun in my fist and something to look for that's worth finding, eh? I've tried war and steeple-chasing and aeroplanes, but this hunting of beasts that look like a lobster supper dream is a brand-new sensation. Ha!" He chuckled with glee at the prospect. Perhaps I have dwelt too long upon this new acquaintance, but he is to be my comrade for many a day, and so I've tried to set him down as I first saw him, with his quaint personality and his queer little tricks of speech and of thought. It was only the need of getting in the account of my meeting which drew me at last from his company. I left him seated amid his pink radiance, oiling the lock of his favourite rifle, while he still chuckled to himself at the thought of the adventures which awaited us. It was very clear to me that if dangers lay before us, I could not in all England have found a cooler head or a braver spirit with which to share them. That night, wearied as I was after the wonderful happenings of the day, I sat with McArdle, the news editor, explaining to him the whole situation, which he thought important enough to bring next morning before the notice of Sir George Beaumont, the chief. It was agreed that I should write home full accounts of my adventures, in the shape of successive letters to McArdle, and that these should either be edited for the Gazette as they arrived, or held back to be published later, according to the wishes of Professor Challenger, since we could not yet know what conditions he might attach to those directions which should guide us to the unknown land. In response to a telephone inquiry, we received nothing more definite than a fulmination against the press, ending up with the remark that if we would notify our boat, he would hand us any directions which he might think it proper to give us at the moment of starting. A second question from us failed to elicit any answer at all, save a plaintive bleat from his wife to the effect that her husband was in a very violent temper already, and that she hoped we would do nothing to make it worse. A third attempt, later in the day, provoked a terrific crash and a subsequent message from the Central Exchange that Professor Challenger's receiver had been shattered. After that, we abandoned all attempts at communication. And now, my patient readers, I can address you directly no longer. From now onwards, if indeed any continuation of this narrative should ever reach you, it can only be through the paper which I represent. In the hands of the editor, I leave this account of the events which have led up to one of the most remarkable expeditions of all time, so that if I never return to England, there shall be some record as to how the affair came about. I am writing these last lines in the saloon of the Booth liner Francisca, and they will go back by the pilot to the keeping of Mr. McArdle. Let me draw one last picture before I close the notebook, a picture which is the last memory of the old country which I bear away with me. It is a wet, foggy morning in late spring. A thin, cold rain is falling. 3 shining mackintoshed figures are walking down the quay, making for the gangplank of the great liner from which the Blue Peter is flying. In front of them, a porter pushes a trolley piled high with trunks, wraps, and gun cases. Professor Summerlee, a long, melancholy figure, walks with dragging steps and drooping head, as one who is already profoundly sorry for himself.
Lord John Roxton steps briskly, and his thin, eager face beams forth between his hunting cap and his muffler. As for myself, I am glad to have got the hustling days of preparation and the pangs of leave-taking behind me, and I have no doubt that I show it in my bearing. Suddenly, just as we reach the vessel, there is a shout behind us. It is Professor Challenger, who had promised to see us off. He runs after us, a puffing, red-faced, irascible figure.
"No, thank you," says he. "I should much prefer not to go aboard. I've only a few words to say to you, and they can very well be said where we are. I beg you not to imagine that I am in any way indebted to you for making this journey. I would have you to understand that it is a matter of perfect indifference to me, and I refuse to entertain the most remote sense of personal obligation. Truth is truth, and nothing which you can report can affect it in any way, though it may excite the emotions and allay the curiosity of a number of very ineffectual people. My directions for your instruction and guidance are in this sealed envelope. You will open it when you reach a town upon the Amazon which is called Manaus, but not until the date and hour which is marked upon the outside. Have I made myself clear? I leave the strict observance of my conditions entirely to your honour. And no, Mr. Malone, I will place no restriction upon your correspondence, since the ventilation of the facts is the object of your journey, but I demand that you shall give no particulars as to your exact destination, and that nothing be actually published until your return. Goodbye, sir. You have done something to mitigate my feelings for the loathsome profession to which you unhappily belong. Goodbye, Lord John. Science is, as I understand, a sealed book to you, but you may congratulate yourself upon the hunting field which awaits you. You will no doubt have the opportunity of describing in the field how you brought down the rocketing Dimorphodon. And goodbye to you also, Professor Summerlee. If you are still capable of self-improvement, of which I am frankly unconvinced, you will surely return to London a wiser man."
So he turned upon his heel, and a minute later, from the deck, I could see his short, squat figure bobbing about in the distance as he made his way back to his train. Well, we are well down channel now. There's the last bell for letters, and it's goodbye to the pilot. We'll be down, hull down, on the old trail from now on. God bless all we leave behind us, and send us safely